to the Fantasy Footballers Dynasty Podcast with Borg, Betz, and a Baller.
Welcome back. It's Wednesday, January 17th here on the Dynasty Podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Borganoni.
What?
We're still working on that
Is
stuff.
it January? Betz, what did you hear?
I heard Jenny.
We're in Jenny.
Jenny. I don't know if it was like a lag on the internet or what, but it's January, folks. Welcome in to the always well-prepared Fantasy Footballers Dynasty Podcast.
And wait,
Kyle,
what day did you say it was, Kyle?
You know, one of the things that I
What
need
day
to admit off the top, I'm bad at this. I'm bad at introing the podcast, and even worse, the part that I hate the most, I hate outroing the podcast. I don't like those parts. So I usually
I get that,
pass
but
the ball.
Like you go to, sometimes preschool, for sure kindergarten, and they're like, "Hey, kids, it's January," and then you look at what day it is, and you're like, "It's that day." Now, Josh is saying you said the 17th.
I might have said
17th.
Oh yeah, it's definitely wrong in the doc here too.
Oh my
Totally.
goodness gracious!
We're off to a good start.
a great start.
Okay, well, perfect.
There's some elementary things that apparently when I was show doc prepping, I didn't even do that part. I might have gone really, really deep in some stats that didn't matter, but I made sure to get this part wrong on this podcast. Anyway, we're glad you're with us in 2025, getting to talk Dynasty with us. Last week, Betz and I got to talk quarterbacks and running backs, got to review the rookies. This week, we're just going to talk wide receivers and maybe, just maybe, an entire hour on Brian Thomas Jr. Would you guys be okay with that?
Maybe. I mean, he is the hotness. If you listened to the Footy Awards on the flagship Fantasy Footballers podcast, Brian Thomas Jr. was beloved, and it's going to be interesting to talk about him and really remember the season as a whole and not just the playoff weeks.
Yeah, I posted a thread of all of his receptions of the year, and it was mostly for myself to bookmark later on and go, I need to remember this dude, or else over the offseason, my brain is going to turn to mush, and I'm just going to go, yeah, he was good, but come on, I mean, it was Jacksonville, they had Mac Jones for a while, was it really that good? And I'm just going to say the film was pretty good. So we'll review him, talk about some of the other rookies. I know some of the big question marks people have moving forward about Rome Odunze, Marvin Harrison, and then we're going to go down in the depths, boys. We might even bring up Jalen Polk.
Oh,
you mean Jonathan Mingo?
Man. Oh, dude. Jalen Polk, so disappointing.
Well, Mike, come on.
So disappointing.
It's hard to get on the field, dude. You got some superstars there. I can't blame the guy. Imagine trying to go on the field over Kayshon Boutte. Okay, it's hard to do.
Yeah.
It's hard to do.
Yeah.
What
Douglas,
a disaster.
I mean,
I wonder if he's going to be a Mike Vrabel guy. Vrabel comes in, and it's just like, Polk's my dude. This guy, we got to get him on the field. I mean, he only had 87 total receiving yards on the season. So we got to up that number.
There was a quote from Vrabel, I guess it was during one of the radio hits he did yesterday or something, talking about, winning teams don't need to throw the ball 45 or 50 times a game. So if Polk is willing to block, we know Vrabel likes to run the ball. He had those years with Derrick Henry in Tennessee. If he's willing to block, then maybe he'll be a Vrabel guy. Otherwise, yikes.
Yeah, you shouldn't have to throw the ball 50 times. I agree, because you should have a passing attack that can get it done in 35 passes. If you're throwing 50, that means you're trailing.
Right.
But if you're throwing 35, you're winning.
Yeah, Vrabel knows ball, man. He understands. He's one of the few shining examples of defensive head coaches that actually, showed out for a long time. It's a bad list if you go down. But this year is actually, the last couple of years, D'Amico Ryans has been awesome. Dan Quinn punched me in the face and said, hey,
yeah, he did.
I know what I'm doing. So maybe the data is changing a little bit for us. I did want to mention that on Super Bowl Sunday, we'll be launching our Dynasty Pass for 2025. I put out a little but a little NFL draft prospect primer just to make sure I tease the people. If you're one of those people, it's like, I don't know all the names. Here's a place to start. But we go fully into every single prospect, talk about their production profiles. We're gathering a lot of that stuff now and starting the scouting process. But that comes out Super Bowl Sunday. That's when we'll be launched fully with the team opportunities. And also, we do some mock drafts for those people that need Dynasty information. They're drafting in February, and they need it for themselves. So get excited about that. Mike, I know behind the scenes, that's something our team is going to be working on over the next month.
Absolutely. Just trying to recover here a little bit from the main season, get the brain right, get it back on track, but juiced up. This is always a really fun time once we get into like the middle of January, because then the film must be ground, boys. Must be grinded. I don't know. How would you say that?
Not like that.
Grind. Yeah, there's some film grinding going on right now.
There you go.
So dynastypass.com if you want to be a part of that. I did have a quick question
we have that link?
I believe so. I believe we got like every single...
Dude, we got so many URLs. Hey, yeah, we do. Look at that, dynastypass.com. Great work, team.
I did have a quick question that had to do with rookie picks, because a lot of people right now, I think the conversation is, I know who I think I want at the 101. I want Ashton Jeanty. I want this running back, and then I don't know what else is going to happen. And a lot of people have kind of penciled that in. So the question I'm seeing, it's on our Discord, this one's from Eisenberg44, is basically, what do I need to pay to get up to the 101? So for him, he has the 103, 109, 110, and was asking, what do I need to give up to get up to the 101? So let's say you did have the 103. What would you feel comfortable? And would you guys be making that trade right now, as opposed to the 101's only going to get more valuable? We're only going to get more information. So Betz, what would you do in the situation at the 103?
Yeah, I mean, if this trade is on the table and it's a possibility to even execute this trade and go up to the 101 and give up, in this hypothetical, it'd be the 103 and the 110. You know, I'm not fully into this class quite yet. Like, I've kind of started. I've touched on a couple of guys, but like I haven't really gotten into the full nitty gritty here. But Jeanty is clearly going to be the RB1 in this class. He's going to be everybody's RB1. He's probably going to go in the first round of the NFL draft, is what a lot of people are saying early on. And as the weeks go by, you have more of the NFL draft community talking up Jeanty, Dynasty people. This price of the 101 will skyrocket over the next 3 months, basically, as you look forward towards April. And then if he goes to a landing spot where you're just like, oh my goodness, like the value will be completely outrageous and you won't be able to do this deal at all at that point. So if you think that that is the move and you are that high on this player, which I'm not saying is right or wrong, I haven't gotten there yet, but if you think he is, that much of a difference maker, I think doing this right now is definitely viable. I mean, the 110, like it carries value in name, but if you go back the last 3, 4, 5 years of like who actually gets picked around that range, they're not home runs by any means, and there's a ton of misses there too. So yeah, I think this is a very fair deal, and I definitely would be interested in doing this.
I think it's fair. It's just a like how deep, because the question specifically was, my running back room is junk and I'm trying to fix that up, and the value of being able to take 3 shots, so you have the 103, 109, and 110, like you need multiple scratchers here. And will the 103, it just comes to this, will Jeanty be that much better than the 103? And I'm with Betz of like, I don't know. I mean, I don't know either. I don't have all the information yet, and landing spot and draft capital is so important. He looks like an absolute stud, but he's in a weaker conference. And sometimes the high T management of NFL, like they double count that against a player, and like, no, that player drops, and sometimes different players go higher. Like, remember the Sony Michel, Nick Chubb year. Like, I liked Sony Michel a lot, don't get me wrong, but it was like, Nick Chubb is an absolute unit. Like, this guy is going to be a beast. And then who goes in the back of the first round? Sony Michel. And now all of a sudden your brain is fried and you're like, well, he went in the first round.
Right.
Obviously, Sony Michel is the pick. And it was not. The pick was Nick Chubb, who, despite where he is now at his career with these catastrophic injuries happening, Nick Chubb was the guy to have there for years. So it's difficult at this point. You know, if you're saying I need to rebuild my running back room, I don't know if right now is the time to make that trade. In terms of you need all those picks. If you want the 101, I think I'm with Betz of we're all going to go crazy and blow this thing out of proportion. Of this is it's Bijan, it's Breece Hall. You got to have the 101. How's Marv Harrison doing right now? How are we feeling about that? Feeling like crap. Feeling like I would trade him and a first to get Brian Thomas. Like, I'm not actually doing that, but like that's how it feels.
That's
right
how it feels
now.
for sure.
So just be careful with your capital. But if you are really, really excited, I don't think that's a bad trade to get up to the 101.
Yes, I think the compensation part I'm totally fine with there. I do worry when we're at this point in the process in January and we've already penciled in this dude is for sure the 101, which, you know, I put a percentage likelihood that, yeah, it's more likely than not that he's going to end up being the 101 in a lot of drafts that are one quarterback drafts. But I wouldn't put that at like higher than 70%. You know, it's like there's room for other players. There's room for landing spots. I mean, if he goes to Dallas at 12, which Vrabel was talking about running backs and you ride running backs and then I was thinking about Dallas and whoever their guys, it's like they're going to be like, let's just go for it. Let's get this running back. So Dallas at 12 is an interesting spot if they're going to take a running back. But
the not crowning the 101 right now is
yes.
Just be careful with that. Jonathan Taylor was the 101. Clyde goes in the first round. He wasn't like the consensus. Some people still took Johnny Taylor's. They still kept their wits about them. I did not. I got hoodwinked into going into Clyde. The year that N'Keal Harry goes to the New England Patriots. Did we have
that?
Right, but did we have N'Keal did we have N'Keal Harry as the 101 before all that started?
I didn't. And it's one of those things where I think at different points in the offseason, if it's January, if it's February, it's March, it's okay to change your opinion, but to kind of give yourself a number. We often talk about percentage likelihood. So I just threw out there like 70% likelihood that he's going to be the dude at 101. And I would take him there. But don't just put it at 100% and not think about it again over the next couple weeks. So, Betz, any last thoughts on just how you manage this at this point in the offseason?
No, like I said, I think the deal's fine. And if that's your conviction and that's your take, I think now's the time to do it, right? Because it only gets more expensive and you're going to have to add a second on top of that in, a month, basically kind of thing. So yeah, do it now if that's what you want to do. And I would just go back to like these guys have kind of said these last like 3 to 5 drafts. Look at the names, the quality of names that go at the picks that you're willing to offer and kind of ballpark who might be there this year. That's a good way to do it. But yeah, I agree. Now's the time to do it if you are going to do it.
I a couple of years ago went through every single draft, I think since 2015, and just kind of looked at the process of here's these players, here's why they went there in rookie drafts. And it is a roller coaster of what we thought at the time based on a lot of time opportunity and workload. So for running back, that is the position that we're trying to project. Like, okay, I can see this backfield. They have it to themselves. They're the dude. And if they're getting this draft capital in their first round, cool, we can move forward. But man, there are so many times where we're just dead wrong on these. So there's busts in every single one.
Remember when Malik Willis was like a top 5 pick?
The
NFL draft?
He was the betting favorite to go second overall.
And him and Will Evans the last couple of years.
Oh, my goodness.
Yeah, Willis actually was okay this year.
Yeah, he was.
He was okay.
He definitely was. I'm just saying, draft capital. We don't know the draft 2 days before the draft.
Right.
You don't have a complete lock on what's going to happen. But January, especially, be careful.
Yep. All right, let's move on.
Rookie review.
Last week, we kind of laid the groundwork of how we're doing this process, and we're treating it like a checkup. So almost a year later, some of these prospects, we went super deep of what could go right and wrong in the draft process. So I might have thrown out some thoughts like, Worthy, I don't see how it's going to work in the NFL. He's just not as fast, on tape. And I took a couple of stomach punches. And then weeks 2 through like 14, I was like,
yeah,
okay,
you recovered.
How's this player? I recovered. And then the final, 3 weeks that he played, he was really, really good. So we'll talk about Worthy today. And mine wasn't a take of this guy stinks. It's just like, how is this going to work in the NFL? And for a while, I was like, what are they doing with this dude? So we'll talk about Worthy. We'll talk about the historical context. So this player was drafted here. And here's all the players over the last decade of what they've done. And a lot of times, if you're mentioned among the Odell Beckhams or Jamar Chases of the world, or A.J. Brown from your rookie year, you balled out. And we have some guys this year that did that. And then we'll talk about their value moving forward. What do we do? So remember last year, we started this conversation with Puka Nacua, and we were like, my brain hurts from thinking about a player with this draft capital doing what he did, and where do we put him moving forward? We're going to have to do that, guys, with Brian Thomas Jr. That's going to be the first name that we bring up. I'm going to order these by fantasy finish, and then at the end, we'll throw out some names that, like, okay, where does Rome Odunze fit in, or what do we do with Ricky Pearsall? So names like that. But let's start with Brian Thomas Jr. And first, I just want to get a reaction. Did you guys see 1,200 plus yards and 10 touchdowns on the table this year? Because I did not.
I did not.
I did not. Nope.
I throw that out there because I vividly remember Andy having a conversation this summer. He was the most pro Brian Thomas Jr. of this group. And he's like, I feel like, I haven't projected for 1,200 yards. As somebody like behind the scenes that gets to work with numbers, I was like, Andy, I can't let you say that.
Delete that from the podcast.
That's irresponsible in our projections. And he was pretty firm that he thought BTJ would be the guy. He ends up as the wide receiver 4 on the season, which feels just wild to think about. It was a monster rookie season, 3rd in receiving yards, 5th in deep targets. And then a number that I want to bring up, we talk about this with college all the time, a dominator rating. If you'd use it in the NFL, his dominator rating was 44%.
Sweet fancy Moses. So explain dominator real quick, Kyle, for people.
Yeah, so basically the percentage of the team's overall yards and touchdowns is just a wild, and we weight those usually when we talk about.
That's an elite running back right there.
Yeah.
Not who gets handoffs and stuff, not a guy who has to go down the field for every pass.
So, I posted the thread just to remind myself, but Betz, I'll let you start the conversation of Brian Thomas Jr., rookie year. What are your thoughts?
What's there to say? It was an incredible season. One of the best rookie seasons we've seen in a very long time. One of the best ever. I went back to the last couple of years and looked at who eclipsed 2.3 yards per route run or higher as a rookie if they've seen at least, I think it was 75 targets as the qualifier I used. The names on the list are the names like A.J. Brown, Justin Jefferson, Jamar Chase, Chris Olave, Puka Nacua, Rashee Rice, Brian Thomas Jr., and we'll talk about Lab McConkey, who's also on that list. But that's the type of season it was. It was that good. And I think when you look at the context of the season in and of itself, the Jags were terrible. And there was just so many moving parts from offensive line injuries to Trevor Lawrence getting injured. Some of the wide receiver injuries in theory may have helped the target competition be pretty soft. I think this type of outcome would have happened regardless. I think he's just that good. But the team was so bad and he was still doing this. Catching passes down the stretch from Mac Jones. Okay, Mac Jones. I think that all needs to be put into the context here. He wasn't catching passes from a Joe Burrow type or Lamar Jackson, right? Really, really excited to see what he did here. And, and I think when he came out of school, a lot of people were questioning okay, how much of this was playing next to Malik Neighbors? Obviously now in hindsight, we know this, but Jaden Daniels is a superstar. How much of it was that, opening up the offense? He's kind of getting a ton of deep targets. How sustainable is this in the NFL? I think he proved a lot of that, a lot of those questions wrong, or at least answered those questions, because he could do stuff close to line of scrimmage, down the field, and in the intermediate area. So just a full season from Brian Thomas Jr., really, really strong, and not much negative, honestly, to say, given how strong the season was.
Yeah, I'm in, so I will start the conversation there. But it's you should always try to devil's advocate at least a little bit, and it's so It is. I mean, I guess this is a point in his favor, but it's Amon-Ra St. Brown-esque. Now, he had obviously had some bigger games at the start of the season, talking about Brian Thomas Jr., but it was week 13 on when he just went nuclear, and that's besides weeks like 1 through 3, that's when our hearts are most emotionally receptive to what these players are doing on the field, as in I take everything they do bad or great personally. So, just I feel like it's hard intellectually trying to make the argument, because I think he's so great. But that happened. Christian Kirk hurt. Evan Engram, an absolute target machine, hurt. That's why I'm saying it feels like Amon-Ra, where it was the end of the year, all those guys were hurt on the Detroit Lions, and all of a sudden St. Brown is a superstar. And this one with the extra variable of the Trevor Lawrence to Mac Jones, which Trevor Lawrence will be the guy. And is Trevor Lawrence capable enough, and does he have enough of that? It's not the Mac Jones. I don't know what to call it, but just where you're like, yeah, I'm going to throw it to my number one guy, just over and over and over. That's how I'm going to choose to do it. Will Trevor Lawrence be willing to do that so we can, maintain those awesome numbers? Because the first half was bumpy. You saw signs of this is a great player, and then you had games where he would vanish. But Trevor Lawrence was also playing hurt. There's it's so wild. The season is so wild for Brian Thomas Jr., what he was able to accomplish on that team. So I'm all in. Just want to try and get a full 360 picture here of what's going on, and not don't just glance over and try and wash things out of why this could have gone so good for Brian Thomas Jr. At least acknowledge those things happened and take it into your process.
Well, yeah, one of the things, if you want to break up the season, Trevor Lawrence was there weeks 1 through 9 and then tried to come back a couple weeks later. But essentially, weeks 1 through 9 was Lawrence, rest of the way was Mac Jones. And Trevor Lawrence is a first read type thrower. Like Tua and Trevor Lawrence are the ones that throw their first reads more than anybody else in the NFL. For the first part of the season, like you mentioned, Mike, it was a lot of Kirk and it was Evan Engram who were a part of the offense. And so down the stretch, it was Mac Jones, who we can joke about Mac Jones. The dude probably got himself a contract somewhere else of just like being a competitor and being a capable backup. I'm not saying he's good, but he actually showed some spunk.
You're saying a backup contract. Yeah,
yes. A backup contract.
Yeah, for sure.
That's a big deal for somebody at the end who we were like, oh, this is a washed out, former first round pick. But down the stretch, you kind of saw he was the first read, and they used him a ton in the screen game. We'll talk about Marvin Harrison. Guys, do you guys know how many targets behind the line of scrimmage Marvin Harrison had this past year?
It was 0, wasn't it?
0.
Yeah, safe. Yep.
You just didn't get any layup throws where Brian Thomas Jr., you saw the yak plays, you saw him use there. And I went back to our notes this past year of like, okay, we were scouting this player. We're like, man, look at all these deep balls, these go balls. And they're kind of giving him these targets to just create in space. But I found this note that I forgot I mentioned, and it was about his route running. And I'm going to use a video game analogy here. So when you're playing Super Smash Brothers, which, I mean, come on, if you're not,
okay,
what are you doing? There's a certain level of player that doesn't just, run around and fight. You start doing this move called wave dashing, where you're just kind of like, you're gliding when you play. You're not just running up to people and fighting. Those are the best players in the world when you can play like that. That's the way I kind of describe his route running. Even though he's really tall, he kind of just glides when he runs, and so he's not just a deep ball threat. And they kind of used him on these slants and stuff where he can just take it to the house. So the comps, you guys remember the comps that we gave him were, is he Terrence Marshall Jr.? So did he have a big LSU season and he's going to fail? I wrote, is he a more slender Nico Collins? Which is, I was like, okay. And then the high end was, is he 80% of CeeDee Lamb? And so that kind of finishes the discussion here. Where does he slide in among dynasty wide receivers? Like, I have Chase and Jefferson kind of in their own tier.
Sure.
But then in this next tier, Amon-Ra, CeeDee Lamb, Neighbors, Amon-Ra. That's kind of like where I have it. And then this next tier is Puka, Nico, and Drake London. Where do you put Brian Thomas Jr.?
Just realizing our list has Amon-Ra twice on it. Amon-Ra, CD, Neighbors,
Oh, dang.
Amon-Ra. I was like, wait,
Dude,
did I just hear that wrong?
January 17th.
I'm not a details guy. I just put the numbers down.
Oh man. Yeah, I mean, look, if anybody wanted to put him in that tier, I don't think that's wrong. Like you bet on
Tier 2?
Yeah. I mean, you bet on
Okay.
alpha talented wide receivers who show it in year one.
22 years old.
The age is incredible. The draft capital is incredible. The year one production is incredible. All the underlying peripherals are great. I get it. I think he's there. Looking at Nico and Puka and Drake London, like I would love all those guys on my Dynasty team. It's tough with a guy like Drake London, who I think we all kind of got a little bit out over our skis on this past offseason with the Kirk Cousins contract. And obviously in hindsight, it's easy to say that. But like when I watch Drake London, who's awesome, but I watch Brian Thomas Jr., like there's just something different about the way Brian Thomas Jr. plays that like I could see him being like a true alpha in the league for years and years and years. And not that Drake London can't, but the way that Drake London like has to win, in my opinion, is through volume. Kind of is how his game is usually on the field. But like Brian Thomas Jr. could just have an outrageously efficient season, even if he's not getting 150 targets. Like I think Drake London needs that to be the dude. So that's why I think I'd have him above Drake London. But yeah, with Puka, with Nico, like I think he deserves to be there.
Yeah, I don't have any disagreements there. I'd put him in tier 2. Can he get to tier 1? Maybe. Like getting up to tier 1 is something we need to not just hand out all willy-nilly, but I'll say it's not impossible. And it's impossible for a lot of guys. Like you'll never ever be what Jefferson or Jamar Chase can do because you don't have the natural ability combined with what you have worked for. So Brian Thomas could possibly get there.
Yeah, I probably have him at the back end of 2, maybe at 3 in terms of these tiers. And we get to talk about that, all off season. At the end of the day, is there a huge difference between him and Puka or Nico? Maybe not. Like it's not really a conversation point. But this next guy that we'll talk about in just a second, I think it is a conversation point. So let's take a quick break and we'll be right back. Finishing as wide receiver 7 is Malik Neighbors. Was taken 6 overall by the Giants. 166 targets is the most ever for a rookie wide receiver, and he missed 2 games. So that's crazy. 109 receptions, most ever for a rookie wide receiver. We talked about dominator rating. His is at 47%. I don't know if that says more about him or the Giants based on that number.
Sure.
I mean, he was the offense.
So, I joked about Wandale all year, but I'm going to say it again. It was the most worthless season of all time.
Oh, man. Well, I wish I could. Underdog put a stat out where it was like, that was the most receptions for anyone who's had under 800 yards or something like that. And he
had like 600.
And he was under 700 yards.
So
he's playing in a 2-point PPR league.
So Malik Neighbors, the ride though, we have to remember, like the first month of the season, he had some monster performances, and then he was hurt or he had a concussion, and then the ride on the way back was rough. I mean, the volume was there, so in full PPR you were totally fine, but it wasn't really till the last month or so of the season that we got to see the real true fantasy production, and you could throw that on the quarterback, the scheme, whatever else, but I don't know, Betz, what are your thoughts on Neighbors, and would you take him over Brian Thomas Jr.?
Oh, man, that is tough. Because before, like, obviously entering the season after the NFL draft, it was no question Neighbors over Brian Thomas Jr. Honestly, I think it's a coin flip. I mean, they're both superstars. I think they're both set up for success for years as far as their talent is concerned. With Neighbors, like, he's a guy that I feel like this past year could have been even better, which is kind of wild to say because he did see 166 targets with 1,200 yards. But when your scoring expectation is as low as it is every single week playing for the New York Giants without Daniel Jones, which is saying something, Like, it's hard to be incredible in fantasy. And yeah, like he had that insane week 17, which in fantasy championships means a lot to us, where he was the wide receiver 2. But like you said, from week 7 to like week 14, week 15, 16, it was kind of rough in fantasy land. I'm not saying that's his fault, because the team just isn't scoring touchdowns, and like you need that to take you to the next level. So I have question marks just about what does that look like this coming season with the Giants. I think they could be better, but like, you know, it's going to take a lot, and it's going to take a lot to turn that around quickly. They've got to hit on the quarterback. So that's the major question mark for me. But outside of that, the talent level and, you know, production that he'll have for years in this league, to me, is no question. Just commands targets, can win down the field, short, intermediate, can do it all. Great route runner, super explosive. Just, I think he's a true alpha. And like I said, my only question mark is just this Giants team for the next, 2-3 years.
They pick third overall.
They pick third. And I mean, speaking of draft craziness, like the quarterback class, the incoming quarterback class, I mean, where is the confidence?
Not great
in there. You know what I mean? Because I've seen Sanders is the flashy name. I'm not saying he's the QB1, but just like
everybody knows
normies him. Out. Yeah, normies. Like I'm not dialed into college yet. I'm about to get scouting on these prospects. I know who Shedeur Sanders is because of all of the media and because of his father, and he's a good player, it looks like. But I've seen, the anonymous scout comments coming out of like, no, this is a quarterback who you should take at the top of the first round. He's definitely worth it. And I've heard this is a player who should be drafted on day 2 or day 3. Like the anonymous opinions coming out on him are all over the place, which maybe people are smoke screening and things like that. But point being, when quarterbacks are locked in, that wasn't the way that people talked about Andrew Luck or Trevor Lawrence. It was like, that's the guy. That's the 101. We know it's going to be the 101. Let's hurry and get the draft going so we can see who the second pick is going to be. So it's being at 3 in this class looking for a quarterback. I don't know. I mean, yeah, like Tennessee's at 1, Cleveland's at 2, and Cleveland especially now with the whole Achilles gate that's going on with Deshaun Watson of the re-tear. I mean, Watson was already toast with the tear, but a re-tear, now maybe Cleveland gets out of a contract. They're in a really big deficit here, talking about the Giants going to the offseason. And hey, maybe a little Drew, or not Andy Dalton, Sam Darnold. Hey guys, can I talk the Giants into Sam Darnold?
He did New York. He's like, I don't want to go back to New York, man. It's like, so here's my question for Neighbors, because we're not questioning if he can earn targets. I mean, highest targets per route run, highest target share of any rookie wide receiver over the last decade. So bonkers. But does a quarterback actually change anything? Or have we kind of like, the adage we always give is like, it can only get better from here for quarterbacks. Now it can obviously, horizontally kind of stay the same. He gets a bunch of targets.
Actually, when you look at an XY graph, there's another option.
He could Garrett Wilson, where you get a ton of volume. And he breaks the Garrett Wilson, targets through 2 years number, and you go, oh man, this is still the same thing, and you're still hoping for more. But I don't know. I personally would take him over BTJ. I don't think it's by a ton, but I would. He's not just an alpha. He's like, he can be the alpha. And I have more confidence in him going to tier 1 than BTJ, where I think BTJ might end up with more touchdowns, but Malik Neighbors is just different. When you command, and it's like, if you're in full PPR, congratulations. You're going to get 150 plus targets every single year, and it's guaranteed. But I don't know. I don't think the quarterback, whoever it is, changes that much for me.
I think
I lean Malik over Thomas.
Still. I think Kyle's point there, like the Garrett Wilson type thing, is what I was referring to with like the Giants for the next year to 2 years. And this is Dynasty, so I'm not saying like you should be worried about Neighbors in Dynasty. Like clearly he's a, top 10 overall startup pick. Like he's just that good. But when you think about the Garrett Wilson value in the market for the last couple of years, it was like the question about his talent is not there. He's talented. He's going to earn targets. But to be a top 10, top 5 fantasy receiver, you've got to score touchdowns. And I feel like for 2025, that's my concern for Neighbors. So I feel like there's going to be a mismatch where it's like in Dynasty, he's untouchable. And in redraft, you're like, I feel like I don't have to have him, like that kind of thing. So, yeah, but this is Dynasty, and there's no questions about his talent.
All right, next guy we're going to talk about is Ladd McConkey, who somehow finished the season.
No, it's Marvin Harrison Jr., right?
Well, we're going to talk about him in a little bit because, still got a little ways to go in terms of fantasy finish. But wide receiver 12 for McConkey is a lot higher than what it felt like for most of the season. I mean, from week 8 on, he was the wide receiver 8 in fantasy, and that's kind of how you have to break up the Chargers season of what did they do for the first month, which was, hey, we know the brand of football we like. So for the first month of the season, they were 28th in neutral pass rate, 31st in yards per game passing. It was bad. It was bad. It was one of the things that was like, this is all of our fears for fantasy of like, oh no, they're not going to throw the ball.
Giro at his best.
And then they had a bye week where I don't know if Justin Herbert said something, but he's like, let me throw the ball. And so from then on, they were 5th in explosive pass rate, 8th in yards per game, and McConkey was awesome. I looked this up. He was 3rd in the NFL in receiving yards on play action passes, behind only Jamar Chase and Justin Jefferson. That's like alpha stuff. And he's such a funny player because when you watch him on the field, you're like, I'm as big as that dude. like I'm the same size as Ladd McConkey. And he's just out there in the playoff game putting up 188?
You are not, though.
I'm the same exact size.
You are not. We are. I mean, I was at the watching the Vikings get absolutely thromped last night, and I was with a buddy of mine, and we were pretty close to the field. And you're looking down there, you're like, I know these. When I'm watching TV, I'm like, those guys are big. And then you get close in person, and you go, no, they're people can't be this big. These are the biggest, strongest humans I've ever seen in my life. So I'm saying Ladd McConkey, to us nerds, when we're looking at that isometric view that we get every single Sunday, like, no, I'm about the same size as that guy. No, go stand next to him and be like, that dude is 2 times thicker than me.
I love Kyle's just from afar takes on player speed, their size, their athleticism.
Kyle thinks very highly of himself.
No, I love Ladd McConkey, and I will always stick up for him as a Georgia boy, but it's like when somebody gets this open all the time against any coverage, because that's one of the things we look at is like zone coverage, man coverage. Maybe they're better at this. It didn't really matter. He just wins over and over and over again. We saw that in college, but I think our biggest bugaboo was like he was never on the field.
Yeah, it was weird.
It was a weird thing for us to look at a player who just didn't have the amount of reps and targets and routes and everything else to go like, what does the NFL think about them? So in the pre-draft process, we were like, I don't know. And then in the NFL draft, it was like, okay, 34th overall. They think he's the dude. And clearly he's the dude. I mean, if you end up with 1155 in terms of yardage, that's wild stuff. Betts, any takes you want to give? Because it's the 5th best yards per out run for zone, 4th best yards per out run of any wide receiver. I mean, on a per route basis, he was over the top.
And that was the story coming out with Ladd. Like you just talked about, like he didn't play a ton of snaps, didn't run a ton of routes in general. And therefore, if you're more of a production profile, analytics-based dynasty player, Ladd did not look very good at all because he just wasn't on the field enough. But everything for him on a per route basis at Georgia was off the charts. Then you watch him play at Georgia and you're like, oh no, this guy's good. And then everything he did in college, he did in the pros. Super good route runner, so reliable, catches everything. Can win in the middle of the field, which, like you said, Kyle, for a guy who's just so small. I mean, Kyle's the same size as him.
I didn't say he was small. I said I was the same size.
Kyle.
So you're big.
No, I didn't say I was big.
You have to pick one. You can't say, I'm not saying nothing.
He's
Kyle's
Kyle
throwing
size.
things out.
For a guy that's the same size as Kyle, to win in the NFL over the middle of the field. I mean, Kyle, you would die out there. He's just
same size.
He's good.
We bench the same. We
they
squat
didn't put
the
me out
same.
there,
Same
so
40.
I don't know how I would.
All the same.
Yeah, same. Our mile time about the same.
But
I was always QB and flag. So who knows? No one knows.
But yeah, anyway, Kyle, and Lad together on the field, just unstoppable. Lad's just ability to win at all three levels for a player that you don't think could actually do that, because he's not flashy. He's not, this huge.
That's the point.
This huge guy, like he just does it, and he wins with his route running, which those are the guys that I think can stick around the league for a long time and be productive. So yeah, I think Lad's got it. And look at the depth chart. Like, this is his team as far as the pass game goes. So yeah, obviously if you took him where you did, like he was behind, Neighbors and Marv and Brian Thomas Jr. and all these guys. And he was kind of like all right, I didn't get Bowers.
It was him and Keon Coleman.
Yeah, it was like, I guess I'll take Lad or Keon Coleman. It's like, man, that looks like a home run pick if that was you this offseason.
Yep. He may not be there yet, but I will be ranking Ladd McConkey like he's a tier 3 guy. Like my chips are already all in. It is for a rookie season it's perfection. It is the full, like, hey, we're getting acclimated. They have Huge is on this team. They're gonna try and see if they can recoup some of the value that they spent drafting him in the first round. Like, they're gonna do some other things. They're gonna make the rookie earn his role as becoming the number one guy on the team. And by the second half, he did. And he's just, everything you guys have said is, I think he's awesome. Can he get to tier 2? That remains to be seen. But I am willing to rank him and price him as in, like, on my team, if someone's trying to come trade for him, or if I'm going to go trade for McConkey. That's the type of move that it could look like an overpay right now to trade for McConkey, but I would be willing to do that because I think he's going to be so amazing for fantasy. It's the 1,100 yards. Okay, that's great. 7 touchdowns, man. Like, a guy of, like, oh, it's a slot player. 7 touchdowns as a rookie. I mean, this dude is going to, and Quentin Johnston's not it. He's not. He's not that guy. Ladd McConkey's that guy. So I'm going to be overly aggressive trying to get McConkey.
Yeah, and some of those touchdowns, we need to remember, they're like breakaway, big play, down the field stuff. Like,
this isn't just the Keenan. Like, we thought that, this is a chance. He could be Keenan Allen, of, like, possession guy, PPR guy.
Mouth.
But he is, he's ripping off chunk plays, man, that we weren't used to seeing from Keenan Allen. Keenan Allen's rookie year, okay, but after that, they used him in a certain way.
That was the comp I gave was Golden Tate, which he was a down the field guy early in his career, but then he kind of turned into this slot only short area, and he had a long career for NFL standards. But I was also telling Betz, like, because Ladd was on all my redraft teams and I had him on a couple dynasty, I feel like I was all Ladd all year. And by the end of the year, Keenan was balling out, Ladd was balling out, and then the playoffs, I was just like, Keenan who? I mean, this is Ladd now. So
with the old man.
Dude, Ladd's the man. So I think in full PPR, I get what you're saying. If that's a big tier 3, let's say right after Drake London, would you rather have JSN or Ladd McConkey?
Well, that's tough.
That is extremely tough. The breakout for JSN is real. Just the actions that the team is taking right now has me not full spooked, but like my antennae are up. Of that was not a bad offense by metrics. Like, this was not a disaster. It was not a catastrophe. And often in the NFL, it takes teams, quarterbacks. The second year is when, okay, everything is clicked. I'm not learning it. I'm just repping it, and I'm going. I don't have to think about it as much, and things take off. But it was a good first year, and they're like, no, Ryan Grubb, you're out. And coach speak, which is they're a good follow on Twitter. They dive deep on what guys are saying. Went back to what the head coach is talking about of, we really, really want to be a run team. And so I'm like, okay, what kind of OC are we going to pull in? So this is me saying I'm up in the air until I find out who Seattle replaces him with. But if they come in with a high T, this is a run-first type of offensive coordinator, that will not be surprising to me if they want to shape the identity of the team that way.
That's a good point on the Seattle thing. I didn't really think about that because my initial take was like, oh, JSN was just incredible. Like, I think it's a fair question. But now that I hear Mike talk and think about it, it's like this guy is tied to Justin Herbert for the next X number of years, no question. Now you have
Correct.
Geno, DK, and JSN learning their third offense in 3 years, right? Because they're changing it over year. And then Geno, how long is he there? That's a question. So yeah, I guess I would take Ladd with some of those uncertainties in Seattle.
It's a coin flip for me.
Yeah, they're very close. I'm just saying of like if we get one of these retread Giro type guys. Yes, Giro they turned it around in the second half. They pulled their head out of their butt and figured out we got to get Herbert going.
Do that.
It's not a head up, but when you're trying to call out plays in the NFL, it's not ideal.
Can't see the play sheet.
But I'm trying to like the JSN's value. I'm going to leave it where it is right now, but he might slide down a couple spots or two. And I'm not calling for red alert catastrophe on JSN, by the way. Just saying of when we're comparing him where a trajectory of a career might be going. I think Ladd might overtake him.
All right, let's talk about Marvin Harrison Jr. because the Cardinals took him 4th overall, and you probably took him 1st overall in your draft.
Yeah.
And week 1 was the pits.
My gosh.
Just the slowest player that's ever lived. Is he trying? Does he even care? He's done. This is over. And I remember on this podcast, we got to kind of break it down. Week 2, torched the Rams. I feel like he did everything in one quarter.
He did because he did.
Okay, if I remember correct, he was a wide receiver 1. So
it was awesome. We were so back.
Man, we were feeling good. And over the course of the year, it was basically, did he catch a touchdown? That's what it came down to. 7 games with a touchdown. He averaged 17 fantasy points per game. 10 games without a touchdown, less than 5 fantasy points per game. And I think one of the hardest things going back through Marv film and just how they manufacture the offense is he wasn't the only dude. And his ADOT, if you look at wide receivers with 75 plus targets on the year, at 14.1, only Calvin Ridley and Rome Odunze had a higher ADOT. So a lot of the throws just weren't easy, and it felt forced. It felt tough sometimes. And at the end of the day, it was like the easy stuff went to Trey McBride. So you can explain away a lot of stuff. Still, 885 yards and 8 touchdowns is not poo-poo, people. You just were hoping for 1,010, I guess.
Minimum.
Yeah, you absolutely were. And there's optimism, but I'm going to start with I'll start with the pessimism and the red flags of like watch a Cardinal game and watch the way that Trey McBride catches a ball, what he does after like his effort to go get it, and then his effort after he catches it and then targets to Marv. And think to yourself, if I'm a quarterback, why would I ever throw the ball to Marvin Harrison when I have Trey McBride out there? Like, this dude is a total dog. And Marv is out here, like, real even-keeled, nonchalant. And, like, that's not what I need from a wide receiver.
He's hot dogging, which is different than having that dog.
Well, hot dogging is showing off, Kyle.
He's farting around is what he's doing.
Yes, he was definitely – it felt like he was farting around. The offensive play calling, not ever getting Marv anything easy is just right to jail. I mean, this should be considered illegal. You drafted him to be a superstar. Treat him as such. Don't treat him as a guy who just has to run down the field don't just be running 9 routes. Like, get the guy touches, let him get involved in the game, then run a 9 route. I mean, the 8 touchdowns is at least you have that. The trajectory, because Marv is a different player than Malik Neighbors, which was we talked about that all of the last offseason. Malik Neighbors is an athlete. Malik could have played any sport he wanted to play. Like, this dude is an electric athlete, and Marv is he's a good wide receiver. I still think he's a good wide receiver and could be a great wide receiver. Like, the path that I am personally hoping for with him, I mean, well, number one could be his dad. You know, like if you've seen the stat line of
that was
of
the
Harrison,
only path for him, the only trade, the only occupation his father would let him do.
I'm saying Harrison Jr. versus Harrison Sr., the end of rookie year numbers are almost identical. It's not great when you adjust for the era that we're in now with passing. But and then it's like, look at Devontae Adams. Devontae Adams he's not the Malik Neighbors athlete. He figured out how to be an amazing wide receiver, and that's the hope and the course that Marv could take. Now, is it going to happen based off of watching what he did in year one? Again, Devontae Adams sucked. Like that dude was real bad for I think 2 years before becoming this guy who we just look at. Oh, there's a Hall of Fame elite wide receiver. He was really, really bad for 2 years. Hopefully Marv is not bad for 2 years. But that's the hope. But man, he's this off season. Hopefully we can get. So we got to get some mental change in here. We need the dog to come out for Marvin Harrison to look like he cares when it's a contested ball and you are this gigantic mammoth superhero of a human being. That ball is yours. No one else has access to that football. It is only yours, and that's not the way he played.
Yeah, I think so. This is a super important conversation because when you took him, it was like this can't fail. That was the thought process behind a lot of people taking Marv.
That was unfortunately the verbiage that all of us were guilty of using.
He didn't fail.
No, I know, but I'm saying relative to expectation. That's the problem with Marv, in my opinion, was the expectation was a minimum of 1,000, like you said, and 10 touchdowns. And like, even then I'd be like, okay, that was fine, right? Like he was billed as this can't miss prospect. I'm not saying he won't be incredible in the NFL for years to come or anything like that. But if like Brian Thomas Jr. had given you this stat line, 62 catches, 885 yards, and 8 touchdowns, you'd be like, okay, for my expectation with Brian Thomas Jr., like I'm excited about that. But because he went top 5 in the NFL draft and because he was taken as a fringe, like round 1 redraft pick, like it feels so bad. So I don't want to overreact to 1 year. I want to take a step back and say, like, for a rookie, this is still pretty good. Like, it's not great, obviously, but it's pretty good. It's just tough when Brian Thomas Jr., Ladd, Malik Neighbors, they're all doing like super special things. And Marv has just a pretty good year. That's the tough part with Marv for a lot of people is the expectation. So if you took him at the 101, I don't think you can. I mean, there's always a price for everybody, but I don't think you can move on low. Like I'm kind of holding out and like,
no, do not trade low.
Right, for sure. And he's still a good player to have in Dynasty. It's just that the pre-draft expectations were so high, it was almost impossible to reach those. But I went back before this show and watched a couple of his games at Ohio State just to like remind myself of like what he was like in college. And the way they were using him there was so different. Like he was in the slot a bunch, super diverse route tree. Not all of his targets were on the boundary, like next to the line of scrimmage. So I do think if he can just get, a better scheme around him, a better play caller, that there is a massive ceiling here. So I'm not super worried about Marv quite yet. Obviously, if he does it again this year, then it's like, okay, we got to have a conversation. But I'm still very in on Marvin Harrison Jr., and I think a lot of people, should still be.
If he's bad again, I'll tell my Devontae Adams story
there
again, guys.
Yeah, there you go. He's got 2 years. No, it's Petzing's fault.
Come on,
Dude,
Drew.
Oh man, gone? I do not care. No, He's getting head coach interviews.
Okay, but he might be gone.
Get him out of here.
They're talking him up. All the execs in Arizona are like, yeah, this guy, dude, he would be great for this position.
How at what point do you look? Are you like, okay, we're far enough into the season, guys. Let's evaluate the offense that we're putting out on the field, the position we're putting our guys in. I mean, 8 games in? Can you look back and be like, we're doing something wrong. We took this guy 4th overall. We're doing something very, very wrong. But they never did. They look back to, great work, everybody. Keep doing it. Send him down the field.
Just to give you a couple of numbers, I mean, Garrett Wilson, Mari Cooper, A.J. Brown, CeeDee Lamb, their rookie year, they had basically the same exact target share. DK Metcalf, who I think is kind of an interesting comp when you think about how he was utilized early in his career of just big plays, basically had the same exact production as rookie year, but obviously the expectations, like Betz was saying, was very, very different. But CeeDee Lamb had a 19% target share as a rookie. I mean, Amari Cooper was there. It's just interesting for us to contextualize these players and to think about what we want them to do and then take a step back and go, this is actually a good rookie year. It's not a great rookie year, but a good rookie year and something to build on moving forward. So if you paid that price, don't just cash in right now.
No.
Don't do that. All right. Take a quick break. We'll be right back. All right, we're going to finish the show off with a couple of quick hitters, talk about some players that were further down. So Xavier Worthy finished at wide receiver 33. And we talked earlier, week 1 was awesome. And then it was kind of silent until the fantasy playoffs, weeks 15, 16, and 17, where he had a 26% target share. He was the dude. And if you look at kind of his dynasty value after week 1, everyone's like, sweet.
I told you so.
And then in like the end of November, there was just this crater of just like, I took him over Ladd, or I took him over Brian Thomas Jr., whatever you did. I took him over Bowers. Like those are that's what people were doing. And now we're kind of seeing this uptick, and we'll figure out what he is in the playoffs, and we'll use those numbers, and we'll talk about Rashee Rice and how he wasn't there and blah, 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 blah. But I think my biggest point I want to bring up about him is like, his usage was all over the map in college. He was like a deep ball guy. And then his final year is behind the line of scrimmage. This past year, 69% of his targets were under 10 yards. And then they started changing his role. And so I don't know, Betz, what do you think of him moving forward? And is he like a high upside wide receiver 3 in Dynasty? That's kind of like the spot that I have him pegged in as.
Yeah, I think when you watch his game compared to the other guys we talked about, like clearly a different level of wide receiver, from like an on-field standpoint, like not the best route runner, not the most like refined NFL wide receiver, but obviously he has the tools that get you excited because he's, unless you're Kyle, fast, as unbelievably fast.
He could be faster.
He could be faster, but he's pretty fast. Dynamic when he has the ball, right? Like tied to Pat Mahomes, like all the things that we were like, okay, this could really work. But they didn't use him as like a true NFL wide receiver. And then you have the whole like changing of target competition all year. Like Rashee Rice was there. He was kind of just a gadgety role player. Okay, Rashee Rice is gone. We need you to step up a little bit. Okay, here comes DeAndre Hopkins. Like, we need you to take a step back again. Oh, wait, down the stretch, you're emerging as like an actual wide receiver. So like you said, his like role in the offense was up and down all year. And you finally saw down the stretch, he kind of was like really part of the game plan. I mean, over the last, 5-6 weeks?
Oh, those targets, man.
Targeted at the same rate as Travis Kelce. Both those guys average 8.6 targets per game. He actually led the team in first read target share from week 13 on. So you did see, I think if you were worried early on, you saw what you wanted to see down the stretch to say, okay, we've got a second chance here in year 2 to really take a leap. And like Kyle said, we'll see what happens here in the playoffs for the Chiefs, however long they're in the postseason. But yeah, he does feel a lot like Rashee Rice of last year, in just the way that the season went, where it was like, is this guy really that good of a true NFL wide receiver? Didn't matter in fantasy because he was getting so many targets. They changed his role, made it closer to the line of scrimmage, more design targets, stuff like that. So yeah, I think Xavier Worthy is still a guy that I would like to have in Dynasty, but no question, like several tiers below the names that we've already talked about on this list.
Yeah, for sure. And the future is so weird for Kansas City. Rice has to recover from his injury, first of all. Then he's going to have to deal with the lawman. That a very unfortunate part of talking about football is we frequently have to talk about these types of stories, and that happened. The speeding incident in Dallas, if I'm not mistaken, like that will come to bear, and there will be a suspension for it. How heavy is the suspension? I do not know. Is it 2 games? Is it 4? Is it 6? I have no idea how serious the NFL will look at his infraction to the player, the personal player conduct policy. And then, so you have all that. Well, okay, let's say that Rice gets back on the field. Rice is not used as a traditional wide receiver. He's used as an athlete, and then Andy Reid's really, really smart of how to figure out how to use it. You can't have 2 of those guys. Right? I mean, you can have Rashee Rice, and then but you have to have some structure somewhere on the field. And can Worthy succeed in a true structured route tree like that? Then you add on, go look at all the near misses of Worthy and Mahomes over the season. It's like, if he hits on half of those, Worthy had a great season, a great rookie season. but he didn't. They were not hitting on them. So he is just, I think that Worthy to me is a guy, he's held value. Now, I mean, meanwhile, other players behind him have surged past him, so maybe I guess you could say he's lost value compared to the market. But for who he is and what I saw as a possibility, I'm holding here on Worthy. If someone wants to trade even, under what true value is, I'm open to it, as in to go get him.
1.33 yards per out run is pretty low. That's below 50 percentile of rookie wide receivers the last decade. But, you have some other names on here: Cortland Sutton, JSN, Dante Moncrief.
Kyle.
Oh man,
Moncrief.
That was great.
Dude.
I
What could have been?
It's my only chance to use this drop ever. But anyway, he left a lot of meat on the bone. I think that's my final point. But 80+% of snaps over the last month or so of the season gives you the confidence that they'll figure it out, because they have a lot of guys running wind sprints, the Justin Watsons or whoever in the world. I think they'll figure out a way to use him this next year. Another name I have to bring up is Jalen McMillan, who the last 5 weeks of the season just went on a tear. 7 touchdowns over his final 5 games. That's the second most for a rookie wide receiver in their final 5 games since Randy Moss. So,
on how many receptions, Kyle?
It's over that final stretch, I think he had like 24 receptions.
24.
But on the season, 37 receptions, 8 touchdowns. And I did bring up a list. I'm not here to scare people.
It's terrifying.
But here are the rookie wide receivers over the last decade to have this many touchdowns on fewer than 70 targets: Martavis Bryant, Anthony Miller, Gabe Davis, Christian Watson, Jahan Dotson, and Jalen McMillan.
That is terrifying.
Basically, if you got a bunch of points on touchdowns, it's scary. It doesn't mean it can't work out. It's just pointing out that he ran really hot over the last part of the season. And then I think my biggest question is, like, what do they do with Chris Godwin? McMillan was a slot guy only in college. And then over this last little bit, it was mostly out wide. So I don't know. What do you guys think moving forward? Are people going to give too much stock over these final 5 games?
Go ahead, Mike.
Go ahead, Betz.
Okay, I got this. So I'm gonna.
You guys are like, I don't know.
It's hard to wrap your head around the end of the season, right? Like, just not sustainable touchdown production. He also caught like over 80% of his targets over the last several games. Like, for a wide receiver, that just doesn't happen. So if you're using this last end of stretch of the season to say, like, oh, this is the type of player he could be moving forward, I think that type of analysis is probably wishful thinking. So now the question is, like, where is the truth? Is it what he was early on, which was not much at all, or this insane end of stretch season? That middle gray area is so tough to try to figure out, because when you look at, like, his fantasy production, like over 40% of that came from touchdowns. That's an unreal mark. And it does feel a lot like Jahan Dotson 2.0 of, like, the peripherals were for McMillan were not very good, straight up. But when opportunity was there, he did capitalize, which you have to give him some credit for. So I feel like he's a guy that in the market I'll probably be trying to trade away if people are excited about this end of season run, because it's just not sustainable. But that said, like, I still think he's like a viable flex type option for you to have in Dynasty moving forward. I don't see a super high ceiling for a guy like this, if I'm being honest. But I don't think we should discredit what he did down the stretch. Obviously, he was very good, integral part of the team as they made the playoffs. But yeah, I think Godwin probably comes back. He seems...
Oh, you're on that side, huh?
I just think that he's got a good thing going in Tampa Bay. Like, the team could use some cap relief for a guy like that, where maybe they sign him to like a year or 2-year deals, give him the injury discount, the hometown discount, that he just comes back. I could see that happening. But he is tied to Baker Mayfield, right? So like that carries some value too. So yeah, I think he's
not a sentence I thought would mean anything a couple years ago.
So I think he's like a fine flex type guy to have on your squad, but certainly if your league is overvaluing him, don't be afraid to trade him away.
Yep. You with that, Mike?
Yeah. It's what we want. He's a round 3 guy, so you're not expecting involvement from the get-go, and Chris Godwin was having a incredible season. Do not forget how good Chris Godwin was this year, because when the injury occurred, we're kind of your memory is wiped from that from behind that point, so it's easy to forget it. But it's a second half breakout, like a pretty strong case for McMillan and those touchdowns, and his catch rate was pretty strong, and the yards per catch is not like it's not Dotson, where it's like outrageous, and you're like, can someone keep going with that? It's a really strong. So he freaks me out in terms of can he maintain this value and move up and be more integrated into the offense. Especially if Chris Godwin comes back, especially would be like, maybe I missed my chance to trade McMillan. But if I have him, if I had McMillan, you're going to have to come with a really strong trade offer to get him away from my team. Like I'll take the bet. I'll take the bet and hold.
Yeah. The team just didn't. I thought they would use him in the slot. Like it would just be a 1-to-1.
Yeah,
Godwin's out.
I did too.
And instead they mostly did Sterling Shepard, Ryan Miller at the very end of the year. And so, yeah, maybe they just kind of feel fine of him going outside, and he was productive when he was in the slot. I mean, he knew that role at Washington, but usually I bet against players like that have crazy efficiency if people have to bank on them growing in them even more the next year. I mean, this is the elusive Gabe Davis tale that people had. Like, oh, he did this. Here's the touchdown, here's the production. Not the same player, but yeah, I usually bet against those players. All right, a couple of quick hitters, and I'm just going to ask the question, and there's a lot more conversation about these players that's going to be had. We have a article that will be out on the website. It's about the rookie wide receiver review, so we will have these numbers in front of you. But do we give Rome Odunze a free pass? He was taken 9th overall, and just 3 touchdowns, just a 17% target share, 1.37 yards per run. He was really bad against zone. We can explain away a lot of stuff. So real quickly, do you give him a free pass in Dynasty in terms of his value after 1 year?
Close. I'll give a BOGO here discount. But this is not a totally
deal.
Yeah, you don't get this for free. I mean, you have Keenan Allen and DJ Moore. That's who you're competing with. So I understand it's going to be hard to get involved. Your offense was a disaster. Caleb Williams, while he could still be the guy, he needs a better foundation around him, and we need someone who teaches to throw the freaking ball, dude. Like you can't just keep dancing in the pocket forever and ever and then take a sack. Like one sack is basically like, oh, just punt the ball because your drive is close to dead. So having said all that, though, you're a top 10 NFL pick. You should be more involved in the offense. You should command more targets than he did. So that's why it's the BOGO pass and not completely off scot-free without paying anything. So his value went down. I mean, it's these other guys. It's like you're telling me, would you trade Rome for Brian Thomas straight up at this point? Yeah, you probably would.
I think definitely.
For Ladd,
I would.
Your draft, your sunk cost is going to say no, you can't do that, but it might be the right move.
Yeah, I don't
know.
I think Rome's tough because so much of it is tied to the offense and to Caleb. I'm not saying like he doesn't have his own role in this situation as far as Rome goes, but a lot of it is tied to Caleb and his struggles and the Bears' struggles in general and everything. And Kyle and I talked about Caleb a ton last week, so if you missed it, go back and check that out. But that's a concern for Rome moving forward. Is like, I don't know how good Caleb is in the NFL. Like we all had these high expectations of like, this is gonna work. We've never seen a rookie quarterback dropped into this type of situation. So if it works for him, then sure, it'll work for Rome. And obviously that line of thinking, is too simplistic. It didn't work out. So if Caleb can kind of get things sorted out, then I think Rome can have a nice bounce back year 2. But that's a question mark. And I honestly don't know what to expect from Caleb moving forward. So there's a ton of moving pieces that, I mean, if you wanted to trade Rome for Ladd straight up, I would take Ladd. Brian Thomas Jr., no question. All the guys we talked about earlier, not including like McMillan. No question for me. But yeah, I think he took a pretty sizable hit here.
Now, because there's just the way that this show is, like we're all about, oh, what if this future happened? We're like a multiverse show, where we try to open these doors and look down them of if that's what happened. Let's say Ben Johnson becomes the head coach of the Chicago Bears, which is like, I mean, I don't know what Ben Johnson's thinking. I don't pretend that I do. But Vrabel got the Patriots job. Like, so that's one job that Ben Johnson cannot take. And that's one head coach that the Chicago Bears cannot pull in. So the odds have improved at least slightly that Ben Johnson takes that Chicago job. I mean, if Ben Johnson wants the Chicago job, I have to imagine that's a yes, sir, Mr. Johnson. Come on in. Let's get this going. So we're like, what is your value of Ben Johnson, what he does to an offense so strong that if he went to Chicago, you'd be like, no, okay, I got to hold Rome.
Yeah, I think it would definitely give a boost. I think what we liked about Rome in college was this bully ball against man coverage, and that's actually what Ben Johnson's scheme and Goff was really good. Caleb was not so good against man schemes this past year, but I just worry about players like this, that their trump card in college is I can beat you physically and I can beat you in the balls in the air. And there's some seasons where Rome Odunze could have 10 touchdowns. But you're going to have seasons like this, 734-3, where they just don't work. And so there's just so many variables.
Do you have other historical comps in front of you, Kyle? I don't know if you have that spreadsheet.
I can look in.
Yeah, just of like who first-round guys, that are putting up numbers like that. Like let's, just do, this is a comparison within the class, right? Say Marv put up those numbers. Rome was picked, what, 9th overall?
Correct.
Yes.
I mean, it's just not that far away from Marvin Harrison. If Marvin Harrison put up the numbers that Rome Odunze put up this year, it would not be, oh, we got to hold on to Marvin. We would be freaking out.
Yeah. The wide receiver, first-round wide receivers that put up similar numbers here, Brandon Ayuk, DJ Moore in their rookie year.
Okay.
Calvin Ridley put up similar yardage, but he had 10 touchdowns as a rookie. So it kind of just comes down to, what do you think about Caleb? And I don't know that answer because I don't know who his play caller is, because he had, it felt like 5 play callers this year, and they couldn't figure it out. So I think Rome is I'm going to wait and see. I'm not going to go trade for him, but I'm certainly not going to trade him at, 75 cents on the dollar of whatever you paid with him. So, but I think Ben Johnson would be really, really fun just because he knows the division and knows how to get the best out of 50-50 deep ball guys like Jameson Williams. So, all right, I'm going to give you a couple more here. Put these 3 in order because they were drafted in order in the NFL draft. Okay, Ricky Pearsall was drafted at the end of the first round, 31st overall.
Okay.
Leggett was at 32nd overall, and Keon Coleman was the first pick of the second round. Put those in order and who you'd want for Dynasty moving forward.
Pearsall's at the top for me. It took him a while to get integrated, and this is a projection of the 49ers. Like I don't think Debo's on this team moving forward, and for that offense to, like, Brandon Ayuk doesn't scare me in terms of this offense needs those players to function. So like Pearsall will still get his. I feel like despite the improvements and my love and hope that Bryce Young succeeds, what I saw from Leggett wasn't enough. We were all just cautiously optimistic on Leggett, knowing like the profile of this guy does not work. Drafting him in the first was wild, and I think Jason said it best of, it's not going to work. I'm going to bet on it, but don't listen to me. Do not follow me. It was because we just loved the tape so much, but the analytics, the profile of Leggett, now combine that with what I saw where, like, I mean, as soon as Adam Thielen was back, Adam Thielen was the dude. You had Coker showing out, and then Keon Coleman, maybe. He's still a maybe. I'll take Coleman over Leggett. But even him, what I saw as a rookie, kind of confirm my priors of I didn't love Keon Coleman. I loved the situation that he was dropped into. Didn't love the prospect, and so it's kind of that's working out more of how I thought it could. And Pearsall is this. He still represents a more unknown ceiling to me, and I think his floor is fine. I do think that Pearsall will have a safe floor, but could have upside where the other two guys I'm already ready to kind of cap who they will be for fantasy football.
I agree. I think I would have it Pearsall, Coleman, Leggett.
Yeah, I think I agree with you in terms of just who's going to earn the most targets. It's Pearsall. I do think Coleman has in his bag to have one of those Mike Williams type seasons where
yeah, that's fair.
It's like 910 touchdowns, and it's because he's the dude with Josh Allen that I'm keeping the light on. But I'm not thinking about him as anything more than a flex for Dynasty. Where Pearsall, it's like you can get some wide receiver two output just based on how the team's shaking. I mean, Debo's basically got one more year. He's going to probably be on the team based on his contract, but who knows what an offseason looks like. They could change things. All right, last question here. And this is a sad one, but it's simple. Can these two players return from the grave? And it's Jalen Polk and Adonai Mitchell. And I mentioned earlier, Jalen Polk basically put together the worst season of any player drafted over the last decade in the first 3 rounds of the NFL draft. I mean, the worst. Worst for yards per out run. He had the worst PFF grade of any wide receiver this year, worst catch rate, worst yards after catch. It was so bad that nobody returns from the grave here. Adonai Mitchell had the weirdest season ever because he was targeted on 27% of his routes and basically did nothing. And him and Anthony Richardson are not on the same page of anything. They didn't read the same playbook. So he's this year's Dontavian Wicks. That was my joke at the end of the year. It's like he's open, but he can't catch the ball. Are you leaving the light on for these guys? Because Polk, I'm out. There's no chance. I don't want any part of him. I don't have him, but I wouldn't want any part of him.
The case for Polk coming into the season, which I was very much in on it because of where the price became for Jalen Polk. This was a second round. This was I got him in the third, but this was like a high second round NFL draft pick. Draft capital still remains like the go-to metric, as lame and boring as it sounds. It is that important. So it was, okay, let's take a chance here. If Drake May hits, and this is their future number one guy, like your risk versus what you're paying it's all upside. Well, the downside came calling, and your penny stocks have been thrown into the garbage because I don't know how you recover from this. I mean, it's Mike Vrabel. It's a new coaching staff, and he's kind of, okay, we'll clear the slate and we'll start over anew. But how do you not look at what he did last year? The team desperately needing wide receivers. They need him in the worst possible way. And you can't get on the field and get targets. Brother, this is a Sky Moore situation. Punt him off the bridge here. I mean, if I'm on my team, I'm making some other trade, and I'm just sliding him in there just to put him on somebody else's team.
I didn't ask for this. Hey, no, but I'll give him to you.
He's free.
Yeah.
Yeah,
like we agreed on the deal. Why are you adding play? No. I really want to make sure you feel good about this, so I'm just going to send him over.
Yeah, there's nothing to say about Polk. Guys like this just don't come back. This is the Jonathan Mingo type situation. Truly horrendous rookie season. So yeah, get whatever you can for him. If it's a late third, a fourth, do it. Just take a dart elsewhere. AD Mitchell's, man, like he had like a nice end of the preseason kind of stretch where it was like, okay, he's flashing a little bit on the field. Like maybe he can get there and do something. Credit to Alec Pierce, man. Like when I was like projecting AD Mitchell, I was like, there's no chance Alec Pierce is going to keep his job over this super explosive, talented rookie, right? And Alec Pierce,
that cardio.
Alec Pierce just did it. Like
he's been training for this moment, guys.
He's so fit. He didn't give up his job, which, maybe that's a knock on AD Mitchell. No disrespect to Alec Pierce, but like part of the bullish bet on AD Mitchell, if you were in that camp, was like he only has to overtake Alec Pierce to get on the field, and he couldn't really do that. So this is a guy that in college if you recall, like his peripheral numbers weren't very good, couldn't earn targets at a super high level. But a lot of people were like, when you watch him play, he's very, very good and he's talented and he shows up for these big, bowl games and college football playoff games. And I was lower on A.D. Mitchell in general. So now you add in the rookie season plus Anthony Richardson showed zero progress as a passer. It's like, man, you really have to have a lot go right here for A.D. Mitchell. So I think I'm pretty much out on both these guys.
And you have, look, Josh Downs is a good player.
Yeah.
He's an electric wide receiver who has a different role than A.D. Mitchell. Just saying, like, he's on the field. Alec Pierce seems to have found favor with his coaches and with his quarterback. I think he's on the field. Michael Pittman was playing with, like a broken back or something, the entirety of the year. Remember, Michael Pittman was going to get put on season-ending IR in the middle of the season, and all of a sudden that changed, and he played through it. He was still hurt for reals, and these are the people you're competing with. And with Josh Downs being hurt and Michael Pittman being hurt, you still didn't really establish yourself as, hey, coach, I need to get some reps here. I need to get the ball. So I think I'm not out on A.D. Mitchell, but pretty close. I would have no problem trading him away.
I think it's a good exercise to look at certain players, look at the team they're in, and just say, maybe they're just on the wrong team. Because I think there is a multiverse where he actually could work.
Yes.
And the same thing, like, I don't think Sky Moore was just the worst player that ever existed. He went to a team where he was never going to see crazy volume. That's kind of what he needed to keep going. And so in Dynasty, you can look at a player and just say, like, oh, I want this to work so bad. It's like with Anthony Richardson, you look at all the metrics in terms of like off-target rate, everything else. He's pretty much at the bottom. It's him or DTR at everything. And eventually, if those deep balls don't hit, then it's just a terrible offense. It's super inefficient. And if Jonathan Taylor doesn't rescue them, it's bad. Maybe he's just on the wrong team. So if there's an injury, sure, he could play the Alec Pierce role. But I think at the end of the day, he's just in the wrong situation. And you kind of have to just live with that. Like, if he was in Keon Coleman's situation, I think we'd be like, okay,
yeah,
it was I could see this working out. But this is just not a situation where you want to invest. So yeah, it's not saying cut him, but you can't cut him.
The Colts pass catchers. I mean, do the Colts pull the plug after one more year of Richardson, or does Richardson get two more?
I think this is.
Or do we see
this is it? One more year.
Do you see the insane Josh Allen turnaround for Anthony Richardson? I mean, we don't, but you got to at least leave a couple percentile chance of something crazy happening. But that's like, yeah, for the next year at least. Colts pass catchers are like a second flex, cross your fingers and pray, and you get a huge game, or you can get absolutely nothing. That is such a brutal situation for fantasy football, because those are, I think Pittman is a really, really good wide receiver. He's not a Jamar Chase guy. That's fine. But he's a really good wide receiver. Josh Downs is a really good wide receiver. Apparently, Alec Pierce might be better than we're giving him credit for. But these guys are just they're toast.
My new offseason goal is to find a stat for Anthony Richardson that's good, that's helpful as a passer. That's not just he has a very high ADOT. That's the only thing. That's literally it. You can just say he has a high ADOT.
It'll be September. Kyle's I'm still looking, guys. One of these days I'll find it.
I mean, I'm trying.
Because what is it? I mean, he's supposed to be giving us, just like absurd rushing yards, and the yards are good. He's a 500 rushing yards in basically 10 games, because he got knocked out of the one. So, but when we're not getting anything out of the passing game, we need you putting up hundos, man. We need to Justin Fields this thing.
For fantasy, it's like, this can work. This can still work. For the NFL, I think it's very clear that he is always going to be behind the 8 ball when it comes to fitting balls in tight windows. Like, he just can't do it. And like against man coverage, he was so bad. Like, so bad that teams just kind of said, like, let's keep a spy on him. And I dare you to because he has guys that can get open. We know Downs can get open in one-on-one situations. They're just little.
Dude, it's
dink-and-dunk
fantasy football got me again, man. Fantasy football got me again. I was very public of anti-Trey Lance before the NFL draft.
Yeah, and it's so funny that people think of you as the pro Trey Lance, but you were very anti in the scouting.
Yeah, saying like it's not going to work. Now, for fantasy, I'm going to try and squeeze a couple top-tier years out of him for fantasy, but it's not going to work. Richardson was the same thing. I'm like, this will not work. You can't go from what he is doing at the college level as a passer and go pro. And you're that with no experience. I mean, both him and Trey Lance, just no experience. And then these teams go all in with the highest equity draft pick they can go with, and I gotta stop.
Betz, I know what to do. Fantasy. I know how we can help Mike. This is how we'll end the show. Betz, you and I. There's two versions of Mike. There's one on one shoulder, one on the other. There's the fantasy hitman that's ready to just go for it, just because he knows what fantasy's about. Now there's off-season Mike that with his analytical eyes can actually see things and go, I don't think this is going to work. We have to remind him. We have to make sure. Play the clips back for Mike because he'll say this won't work in the NFL. I didn't like this film.
We'll clip it
in August. Mike,
we'll clip it all off season. Now through late July, and then as soon as we get on the show or on the main show, Mike starts talking about like, I could see it, man. I could see it. The upside's there. We'll make a full montage and we'll send it to Mike and save his redraft season.
I need one of the producers to just stand off camera the whole show with a water spritzer bottle, and if I start being like going against my actual evaluation of the player, I'm like, but for fantasy, and they just stop it, Mike, stop it.
I realized I just created an off-season project for myself.
Sure did.
I can't help myself from not doing this for the three of them. So we'll figure it out. Anyway, that's going to do it for this episode. Next week, we're going to be talking Dynasty trade targets, and we are going to talk some Brock Bowers because, well, he's good.
Very good.
We'll see you again next week.
Goodbye, everybody.
Thanks for listening to the Fantasy Footballers Dynasty Podcast. If you want to take your dynasty skills to the next level, check out thefantasyfootballers.com.